Yeah, let's finally do this. Hi everyone. Went to see some bands almost a month ago now. It was the first time in 2 months I'd been out to see a show. So now I've seen one show in 3 months. My head hasn't been right for a while. For like 2 solid fucking months. Well, 3 now. It's been a month since I started this script. It's really not a good situation, and this video is just a way to try to organize my thoughts and do something, if not productive, at least do something that requires a bit of mental effort and organization. Maybe hype myself up a bit. The worst that can happen is that I sound like a complete mental case. The script has been percolating for almost 4 weeks, and one of the reasons I'm actually recording today is I may be coming out of my mental fog. My crippling melancholy, my existential despair. Yeah, so instead of now being functionally useless, I'm just reverting to my high-functioning procrastination. I've actually, I've been cleaning the house, this past week, so I have to tell you, the amount of cobwebs that was everywhere, it was embarrassing. I mean, this is not a big apartment, and I just hadn't noticed them for all this time. Made me wonder if I'd actually died and nobody had bothered checking up on me. And yeah, a lot of neglect's just now visible to me after some months. So well, it says instead of getting back to work, it's like I've been working. When I say I'm useless, when I'm like that, it's like project writing. I can do editing and comment, on production stuff, but I just can't write when I'm in that state of mind. I can write this shit. Sort of. It took me a month to get it to a point that I was happy with it, but I can't do project work. But all other stuff, like orders could be processed and all that stuff. But to me, the main thing when I think I want to go home and work, it's writing. That's, yeah. Anyway, so I thought I'd finally record this, but now since I'm a bit more mentally sharp, just a little bit, I get to agonize over reading words that totally fucked Jim wrote and putting that out to the world. But it's what I do, isn't it? The rule is you have to pay for the make-believe insanity in book form, but you get the real stuff for free here on YouTube. And I gotta remember I've got the microphone there instead of on the camera, so I can't be doing shit like this. So, normally I wouldn't talk about going to a gig on the LOTFP channel, but we'll get to that. The theme of the night, for this gig was the Finnish-Swedish metal exchange. 2 Finnish bands playing and 2 Swedish bands. The venue was the loveliest fire trap basement bar dump in Helsinki. Lepakomies, 170 capacity in theory. The kind of place nobody with any sense or class would ever go. In one of the worst neighborhoods in Helsinki. Where I live is another of the worst, but the rent's relatively cheap, so I guess I'm a gentrifier. And lucky for me, there's a bus route that's almost door to door from my apartment to this venue. Tickets were €10 at the door, no advance purchase available, and a mandatory security coat check fee of €3. And I don't understand why they just don't combine that fee and split the money amongst themselves afterwards, instead of making everybody pay the €3 and then... Anyway, this is probably the club I go to see bands most often because the kind of music I like often doesn't play any place much larger than this. Sometimes the touring bands I like will hit On the Rocks, 350 capacity, and if it's a hot metal act, it'll go to Tavastia, 700 capacity. But most of the bands that get to that level are fucking awful, really. This month, I'll be seeing the Mayhem Marduk Immolation show in a 1,500 capacity place. I'm going just to mostly say I've seen Mayhem. And to prepare for that, I bought the new Mayhem album, so I've now got all their albums. Oh yeah, I didn't think of where I'm going to get rid of things after I show them to you. I also bought the Mayhem movie, Lords of Chaos. I know, I just couldn't resist. It's like 1 part dramatization of what happened back in the day, and the violent bits are really fucking nasty. And one part, I think, a member of the first wave having a little fun with the people who started the second wave of black metal. It's good fun. I actually recommend it. I do. Last time I saw Immolation was in 1996, I think it was. It was right around my birthday that year, and I had the shits. I mean, I was sick. But I wasn't going to ruin my birthday plans. And it was the most uncomfortable night physically that I've maybe had in my entire life. I could go on a long story just on that. I've told it before, but I'll spare you. But just remembering that. Anyway, so hopefully this time seeing them will be a little more comfortable. I got my ticket late, so I'll be at the seated section in the back, so maybe I might even save my legs. Anyway, the show a few weeks back. First up was local Helsinki band Ratbreed. I'm going to say a lot of unkind things in a minute, and I just want to make sure to say there was nothing awful about them as musicians. The singer could sing, everyone could play their instruments, the guitar solos were actually quite nice. It wasn't car wreck bad. It was just heavy metal wallpaper. You know, just the most bland, generic, why do they even bother band that you could imagine. And around here, you can tell if an audience likes a band or not by how they position themselves. If they like a band, there will be people like right up close against the stage, you know, filling all the space on the floor. If they don't, there'll be this semicircle thing going on. You know, here's the stage, and then the band is here, and then on the other side, you know, what'll happen if people aren't into the band, there will be people at the corner, you know, in front of the stage. This is usually where I am, so I don't have to have people all around me if it's full. But then there will be like a semicircle going, this is not good visual for the camera. You know, here's the stage, here's the band, and then here's the floor, and then the people there, they'll form a semicircle, leaving a big open space in front of the stage. You know, the people forming the arc, you know, it's a hell of a thing to see. Anyway, lots of space in front of the stage for this band. And there's polite applause at the end of the songs. Heckling bands isn't a thing here. You know, maybe it shouldn't be, or maybe it should be. I mean, especially in a venue this small with a 20-centimeter high stage that might as well just be floor level, why isn't there a dialogue going on between the band and the crowd? I mean, I still remember the Atlanta days when crowds would be violent, sometimes towards the bands, and every night out to a metal show actually contained some risk of bodily harm. Pits would go so hard that you couldn't go to a show of any size without seeing blood. These days, in Finland, I can be old and half crippled down front, and I don't even have to think about it. And maybe that's good for me, that I can actually go to these shows and be down front and not have to think about it. But on the other hand, I think of the way things used to be, and I think, oh, who are all these wimp-ass motherfuckers? Can you imagine being in a band and playing this music and the crowd just sits there looking at you and give you a little applause between songs and like, that's the energy of the room? Whew. I mean, I remember back in the day when I was told I should not come to Finland because I wouldn't be able to handle it. What a joke that is. So anyway, it's an opening act in a tiny club. Whatever, right? I don't know these people. I don't know if they have any ambitions, artistic or commercial. This is just something they do for fun. I only knew, you know, one of the 4 bands playing that night. Never heard of any of the others, including Ratbreed. So I'm open to the idea that any band I see just might be my next favorite band. That's what I'm hoping for every time I see a new band. No pressure. And in this case, what I got was the oral equivalent of a screensaver. I mean, the woman was trying, the singer. You know, she had the moves, the facial expressions. She's actually performing. And everyone else in the band looked like they did not give a shit about being there. The contrast between her energy and the rest of the band's and the blandness of the material actually made her look kind of silly trying to carry the whole act on her own. And I'm just standing there trying to figure out what is happening. How can 5 people get together and compose and rehearse music without anybody speaking up and asking, hey, is this any good? 5 people went, hey. So then mid-set, the woman picks up a flag, a full-size flag. She can't raise it because the ceiling's too low. So she's like got it out in front of her, waving like this. And the whole situation becomes clear to me. See, the flag had the words, "New Wave of Finnish Heavy Metal" on it, in English. I'm like, oh no. It would be an exaggeration to say that I almost died of embarrassment. It would not be an exaggeration to say that I wanted to. See, there's a certain danger in labels and in movements. And bonus points if you know where this is going. Yeah. But being able to describe something succinctly certainly has great advantages. But there seems to be a great danger that the label used to describe this stuff that certain people have done will instead be the goal that people will aspire to fit into. I'm now going to quote some old metal zines that quite literally changed the way I look at art, and in doing so quite literally changed my life. From the zine Metal, Episode 1, Diamonds and Rust. Yes, I've got a whole bunch of stuff highlighted in here. I've had this for, 27 years now? I haven't looked through every so often, but some things just stick in my head. And one of the quotes was, when your appeal to an audience is based solely on nostalgia and close imitation of others, you've got nowhere to go but away. And I'll interrupt my point here to say my first conversation with the person that wrote this, it was a telephone interview where he presented to be someone who didn't actually exist, and I printed an interview in my zine with a fictional character. Thanks, Chris. The other quote from this issue, the satisfaction from mere participation is not what bands should seek. I need a better place to dump this stuff. So, that quote there, the satisfaction of mere participation, is basically a summary of Istin 100. This is a Finnish zine from 1999. The other one was from 1999 as well. It's pretty much a full-length screed against what they call scene metal, as in the metal scene. One of the ways they describe scene metal is, quote, music which is played by people who are really quite fascinated by the idea of making some music of their own, but who have yet to find an emotion or an idea to express. So this woman is waving this flag on stage, and I know the reason now that these people are playing generic discount brand, store brand discount metal. Screwed that up. That are now playing generic store brand discount metal. There's the phrase. I practiced this. Anyway. They're aspiring to fit in, and no matter how much it might move them, any inspiration they have that would mean they couldn't fly that flag instead of some other flag or their own flag, it's never going to get used. They're aiming for center mass, which in artistic terms means that mediocrity is the entire goal. They're wanting to be part of the pack. They want to stand together and not stand out. And it's as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to creative work, you've got two choices. You can do something unique and interesting, whether in form or in personality, or you can be excellent at executing a well-worn style. And as far as I could tell, this band was doing neither of those things, and they were not aspiring to. My impression of the band after watching their set is that Rat Breed has appropriated the sound of heavy metal, but not the spirit. And with that attitude, it's almost a miracle they're not headlining arenas. That must be a work ethic problem. So, after I got home, I took a look, and that flag represents an actual new wave of Finnish heavy metal alliance. An actual organization. I'd never heard of this previously. I look at the website and all the member bands, they got a list of member bands in this alliance. And, I haven't been going to shows lately, but the past few years, it would I go to 2, sometimes 3 shows if they're Friday, Saturday, Sundays. There are certain periods when I'm feeling a little better that if there's a metal show, I'm there watching what the fuck ever, you know? And it's like, I never heard of most of these bands. You know, the one is like, okay, I recognize that one, but that one's been around since the 20th century. They're certainly not part of any new wave of anything. And Ratbreed, as it turns out, they formed over a decade ago, and their last record came out 8 years ago. It's like, new wave of Finnish heavy? So what is this then? If it's some sort of cooperative to publicize the bands, I would say with the amount of these shows that I go to in these tiny little clubs, that would be a failure. And none of the bands, I think, that ever caused anyone to suggest there is a new wave of Finnish heavy metal seem to be in the alliance. So what is it that I'm to assume about all this? That it's a social club for bands that have no aspiration greater than to fit neatly into a label created to describe what other people are doing? I mean, it's really nothing more than a meme they put on a flag. And the entire idea of a new wave of Finnish heavy metal was itself taken from the new wave of British heavy metal of the late 70s and early 80s. The term was coined by a journalist, shit, I should have looked this up, Mick Wall, I think it was. The term was coined by a journalist describing what was already happening at a grassroots level. I mean, these days, everything in metal seems to be a new wave of some old thing because, well, the great thing about heavy metal is that it holds its traditions tight. The even greater thing about heavy metal is it's very skeptical about new influences, and anything that maybe should technically, sonically still be considered heavy metal can get jettisoned off and rejected as something other than metal. Usually that goes on to be very commercially successful, so then the metalheads can go, fuck you, false metal. The downside of this is that music that is supposed to be the brash, rebellious, and uninhibited domain of outsiders leaves an easy template for people who want to play it very safe and just fit in. Point I was trying to make there before it got away from me, get used to that in this script, is that the new wave of British heavy metal was something observed and labeled from the outside. It's not like Iron Maiden or Saxon or Def Leppard, etc., etc., etc. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to flash you my book about the new wave of British heavy metal. It's an encyclopedia of all the bands. A lot of these bands, you know, when they formed 1984, it's like, no, you're not part of the new wave. You're just glomming onto it. Anyway, you know, Maiden, Saxon, and Def Leppard weren't intentionally molding their music so they can include themselves to be part of this label. Shit, Def Leppard did everything they could to get the fuck out of that label. You know, it's not everyone can be a leader, but for fuck's sake, I don't understand people who only aspire to be a follower. To me, there's a great difference between a band that is said to be part of the new wave of Finnish heavy metal and a new wave of Finnish heavy metal band. If you don't understand the distinction, how are we ever going to talk about anything? So, as I was typing this, I was wondering, am I just too jaded? Am I being unnecessarily rude? And then I think of that big empty space that was in front of the stage. And even if nobody else witnessing that performance would say it like I'm saying it, none of them moved up to fill that space while the band was playing, so... So, second band up, Sweden's Vanquisher. Their band concept was all about the Hyborian Age. Conan. They were all dressed like barbarians in furs and bits of leather and bone. It's like, okay, they're going to put on a show. I will note they should have opened the entire show, not because they're worse than the opener, but because watching people in these costumes set up their own gear during the changeover was kind of deflating. You know, if they went on first, they could have done all that outside of the public view. They wouldn't have had to be in costume because they could have set up their gear and then gone and changed before the people came. Anyway. So they started to play, and it was good. Full-on heavy metal, no gap in front of the stage. The singer's voice was particularly good. I mean, he was legitimately good singer. And then they fucked it up. They got to the point where they addressed the crowd, and they ruined everything. I wrote this down right after the concert. This is not a month-old memory. And before I read it, imagine me reading it in the voice of the Swedish Chef. I thought I would be a real asshole and try to make this band member sound like the Swedish Chef, but no matter how much I practice, I can't do the impression to where you'd understand that I'm doing the Swedish Chef. So just imagine it in that voice. But this is what the guy says from the stage. This is our first time in Finland, the most metal country in the world, with more metal bands per capita than any other country, which makes Helsinki the capital of heavy metal. You won this one. And it's like, oh, Jesus Christ. You have a band that's all about the world of Conan, that calls themselves Vanquisher. If they're going to go on about how metal Finland is, the only way to properly end that speech is to tell us that they're here to fuck our shit up and take our goddamn crown. Look at me acting like I'm Finnish in that last sentence, you know? I mean, what would Conan do in this situation? He would certainly not come to the seat of power and kiss people's asses. Again, your band is called Vanquisher, for fuck's sake. And people cheered this shit. You know, Istin's friend metal rant danced in my head before the band even went into the next song. I felt like I was surrounded by pod people. It's like, why are you saying that? Why are you cheering that? What is going on? It's like, no wonder I don't talk to anybody at these things. Well, that and talking to people who are drinking makes me sad, so, you know, but how do you take a band seriously when they don't even believe in their own premise? And so from that point on, Vanquisher just looked to me like cheap cosplayers doing little more than filking. It's very simple. If you're going to put yourself in front of other people, whether you're a musician or an actor or a writer or a game designer, whatever the fuck it is, you have to believe, I mean really in your bones believe, that your audience is better off for having your work, for experiencing your work. If that's not the case, what the fuck are you even doing? It's bad form, but at a convention when someone makes a large purchase from me, I'm grateful. I really am. But then I think, oh, I shouldn't be. In the moment, I'm like, oh, God, thank money. I get to keep doing this. Yes, yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. But if you're putting yourself out there and expecting money from it, theoretically, in my mind, you should have enough confidence in your work to say, you're welcome to a customer instead of thank you. Advice I'll never myself take for $400, Alex. But at the very least, don't break the spell in the middle of the work. As I write that, it's like, didn't I do that in the hardcover freebie thing that came out in December? That text, and I could tell myself, no, you're telling the referee how to run it and why it's okay to run it that way. But it's like, but did I break the spell in the middle? I don't know, it's up to you. Don't reply in the comments, they're turned off. But a concert counts as work, so don't break the spell. If like you're grateful to be somewhere, sure, tell people that like after the set when people are coming up to you. And they're like, oh man, cool, great set. And you'd be like, thanks for having us. First show in Finland, this is fucking awesome. That's appropriate. When you're on stage in costume being Vanquisher, wrong time. I remember sponsoring Devin Townsend at Prog Power USA in 2002, I think it was, maybe 2003. And that caused some controversy at the time with the core fans of Prog Power because Devin Townsend wasn't considered properly prog. You know, Reed being a Dream Theater or later Fates Warning ripoff band. So Devin Townsend gets on stage, and when he addresses the crowd during his performance, he's taunting them. Oh, look at my progressive nipples and shit like that. You know, trying to get their dander up. Or hell, the very first time I ever saw Devin Townsend perform was in 1997 in Atlanta, opening for Testament and Stuck Mojo. We're a strapping young lad, and we're here to play for you. Go fuck yourselves. Masquerade Memories. And that show is on YouTube. You can look that up for yourself, by the way. So, thank goodness Angel Sword was next. Just no bullshit street metal. Yeah, the guys use stage names for whatever reason, but otherwise, it's unpretentious metal. The band doesn't wear costumes, they don't have a gimmick, they don't put on a show, so much as just look completely comfortable and natural performing their songs for the people. And the songs. They actually write songs with verses and choruses that let you be able to tell one song from another without them having to tell you what it is. Which is a huge problem for metal bands in this day and age. I mean, across the spectrum of metal, this is a huge problem where bands have a sound, but they don't really have songs. And they've got some very excellent songs, I must say, especially Hardliner. And I want to talk about a feature of their songwriting that I don't have the correct vocabulary to really talk about. I am a voracious music... No one says that. I'm a voracious music listener. That's something you write. Nobody says that. But I am a voracious music listener. But I don't know anything about music technically, per se. I have no musical training or education. I can't sing. You know, that bit I did a few videos ago really was me doing my best singing. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't play any instruments, and I've made it a point, as much as I could over the past 35 years of metal, to stay consciously ignorant of as much of it as possible. Not easy to do when you had a zine, but the more I know about what goes into making something, the less magic the final result has. For example, when I first attended a Finnish pro wrestling show, independent wrestling show here in Finland, I wasn't watching the match per se, but I was looking at everybody's footwork and form, you know, instead of watching the match as a whole, because I wanted to judge whether, you know, these independent wrestlers up here in Finland were decently trained or not. That's because I have a sliver of inside knowledge in that world. So if I know stuff, that's how I react to it. You know, that's how I look at the performance. You know, in 2005, I visited Fascination Street Studios in Sweden while Opeth was recording Ghost Reveries, and I was watching Mikael Åkerfeldt play leads at a computer desk, while the producer had his hands on the guitar as well while performing. You know, I read in the recent Scott Burns book, which I don't have handy, or no, I don't have that handy. I picked up the wrong book, damn it. Okay, so you don't get to see the cover of that one, but there's a Scott Burns book that came out recently, I think. And, you know, the book says that for the vast majority of Scott Burns' productions in Morrisound, none of the bass drums are live. He doesn't use the live bass drum sounds. You know, and then I remember buying a Strapping Young Lad album, which I don't think I have anymore, and this was over 20 years ago. And it had video extras, and Gene Hoglan was talking about how using a computer to fix his mistakes makes recording go much quicker. Or finding out that for a long time now, because this was 20 years ago when I found this out, that for most professional metal recordings, the guitars are recorded clean and the distortion is done after the fact on the computer. It's like, oh, fuck me, I don't want to know any of this. And then, you know, the classic live album, Live After Death, has a lot of guitars and vocals re-recorded after the fact. Or Unleashed in the East, Rob Halford's vocals were all re-recorded later. And it's like, live albums aren't live albums. And it's like, how much of what I love is actually completely synthetic? Fuck. Even live in person, I'm horrified about how much is piped in. Even at the level of Lapacomias, this tiny-ass club, or the similarly sized Bar Loose in town, bands pipe in loads of shit. I swear this one folk metal band piped in half their shit when I saw them at Lapacomias, but that whole situation had me so paranoid that I don't trust myself enough to have heard it correctly. so I won't name that band. And I was present for another band for their sound checks, and the sound check had so much, you know, they were testing the pre-taped music that it was enough sound for a whole band's performance. And I'm like, what? Well, or that time I saw a keyboardy headlining metal band. I was there for one of the openers, October Tide, especially their first 2 albums. Excellent. But the keyboard player couldn't make it to the gig for this keyboardy metal band, so they just piped in all his parts on tape. Like, what do you... And then I saw the Abbey, and I was really looking forward to that one, and I'm naming them because this really pissed me off. And they piped in all the background mood sounds, and this one extended guitar solo section was completely ruined by fucking rain sound effects. And I was so pissed off by that, I haven't even been able to listen to the album since then. I don't know why anyone is concerned about AI in music. I mean, how can music become any more fake than it already is? And I know this is weird, me putting tangents into the script like this, but fuck it. I look at other RPG YouTube channels, and frankly, they could all use a lot more tangents. I mean, that CD indexing video is the only Matthew Colville video that I actually like, because there's an actual self that seems to be escaping from his on-camera persona. So, back to Angel Sword songwriting. There's a thing that metal bands do, filling up every patch of sonic space with sound. No frequency left silent, no room to breathe sonically. Doing this is a choice. Sometimes it's the right choice, you know, filling out the sound. Sometimes it's the wrong choice, just turning everything into a sonically exhausting sludge. Doing it with more classic-styled metal is often the wrong choice, and where a lot of newer bands working with older styles get everything wrong. Angel Sword, with its 2 guitars, bass, drums, and vocals, same as the other 2 bands I saw that night, leave a lot of space between its sounds, and I think that's a conscious choice that is an important part of their sound. But then, during one of the lead breaks, I was actually thinking the guitar sounds kind of thin, and I had to give myself a mental kick, like, make up your damn mind. And it's like, it's fine. I don't want that perfect, flawless, downright inhuman sound all day, every day, especially not during a goddamn live performance. Give me something human, and then don't bitch then when it's human. Anyway, I mean, the urge to stomp out all imperfections, it's like, I get it, but it's the wrong thing to do. It's why I don't do all the video editing everyone else does. You know, I just work through it when stumbling over words, and, you know, instead of setting up the teleprompter to read, it's like, okay, we all know I'm reading, I'm just read the fucking script. I don't try to pretend I'm public speaking expert via editing, and I don't put on that fake presenter voice up next on whatever the hell this is, you know? And the best thing about Angel Sword is they're not using retro as a gimmick. I've seen people doing the on-purpose 80s posing with the fashion and the haircuts. People intentionally getting those 1980s German thrash haircuts really is something else. But then, you know, you see the people with the bright white high-top sneakers with the tongues hanging loose, and it goes with their battle vests with their patches. And it's a costume. You know, Angel Sword guys, they're about a decade younger than I am, and they're just doing their thing. They're looking like normal people, normal metalheads, and they at least don't come across to me like they're doing a pose. I'm sure I'd be horrified at how normal they are if I spied on them at home. So, you know, top marks. Go buy Angel Sword's albums. Here's their latest one, World Fighter. Go buy their albums, or you are a poser. I left before the last night of the band. As I said, I've been and I've been gaining weight again, and son of a bitch, so not easy on my legs. So I left because of that. It was Sweden's Stormburner. I have no idea how they are. They might be the greatest band that ever lived. I was not intentionally avoiding them. So I just want to say that. And before I go any further, I just want to say that one of the insults I used against metal that's too clean and slick, which doesn't apply this night because everyone at least looked and played the part. I amuse myself by saying this, so I'm going to put it out there, is I'll complain that the band members look employed. That's my idea of a witty and cutting insult. All I'm saying is if you look like you have an actual job, this music shouldn't be for you. There's this one quote that's rattled in my head for over a quarter of a century after seeing it in a magazine. I haven't been able to source it when I want to use it in recent years. I know I'm not making it up entirely, but the context I remember it from might be wrong. How I remember it is that there was an article concerning some heavy metal expo in the mid or late 90s in the US, maybe very early 2000s, where people were gathering to discuss the business of heavy metal. Some people were concerned about metal's image and were trying to figure out how to get more people into metal, how to make people more comfortable with metal. And one of the vendors there said the truest thing anyone has ever said about anything. If this kind of music tries to become respectable, this music will disappear. Or here's a good quote. Quote, I spoke to a German friend who mentioned that much of the division was caused by the old rock-hard crew believing metal to be just music anyone should be able to enjoy, whereas for Getz and his cohorts, those who went rogue, it's something special that's meant to stay outside the arenas of public acceptance. That's from Bardo Methodology number 4. This is number 4, they don't put them on the cover. Yes, number 4. From 2018, from their feature on former rock hard editor Getz Kunemund, I'm screwing that name up, sorry, on his efforts of building the new magazine Def Forever after leaving rock hard. So, that was the gig and some of the thoughts it inspired. And with that, I can answer the question you've all had in your head for the past however long I've been talking. Hopefully not for 4 hours again. Why is this on the RPG channel and not your personal channel? Well, I did say that was some of the thoughts that the gig inspired. I'll be happy to tell you the rest of the thoughts after I explain a thing to you. Yeah, more setup, more tangent. I'm doing this because I have something to say. The audience is irrelevant. Nobody's keeping you here. So, at any time, I seem to have at least 2 thought streams running through my head and my body. One is the very definite, conscious, intentionally thinking thoughts. The other one, I'm more of an observer. They're both me. I'm not hearing voices or anything like that, but it feels kind of fragmented. It's why I listen to music or have a familiar movie on in the background when I write, so the more unconscious stream of thought can be pacified while I'm consciously thinking of what words should go in what order. I wrote my first role-playing book during language classes in integration school because the class activities would pacify the deep brain. I couldn't write jack shit while alone in my room during that time. Tama anmixi en osa suamexi, jag varför jag kan inte prata svenska. Sure, that's the reason. Not that I never speak to other human beings around me day to day, right? On an even more sadder level, this is why I can be in the grocery store telling myself, okay, pick healthier foods. You've been depressed lately. The pounds are piling up again. Make good choices here. You can turn this around. Start today, while I am at that very moment putting M&Ms and Skittles and nacho chips in my basket. When I'm under great stress, the more conscious mind shuts off, and I become either functionally useless as I shut down, or I am, no shit, not kidding, the worst person to be around because I verbally lash out, and I apparently lash out hard. It's just complete luck that I'm not the physically violent type because in the most intense moments, I'm not making conscious decisions. So thank God or Darwin or whatever made me the way I am, that I'm only getting verbally nasty at those times because I'm on autopilot and my conscious decision-making brain is simply not there. But mostly I just shut down at those times, and Nasty Jim only comes out if someone or circumstances is preventing my withdrawal. I often lose time debating myself. I'll vocalize one side of the argument while just hearing the other side, and I'll be pacing up and down the apartment having this debate. That 2023 new release promo video, it wasn't an actual transcript of any such dialogue, but it was a pretty decent simulation of how my brain generally works. I mean, there's a lot of my self-conception about how different I am and how I don't fit in with other people. There's a lot of that is simply choice and affectation. I know that. I'm a little bit self-aware. But that's not all of it. I really do think there's a core somewhere in here that's just something other than, the average person walking around. And I think that's how I end up doing what it is I do instead of something more substantial in the world or more popular in my field. If my brain was in accordance with itself on a permanent basis, I really believe there's nothing on this earth I wouldn't be able to do at a competent level, if not amazingly. Anyway, Angel Sword commands the attention of both sides of my thinking. That's how I actually know something is good, that it not only commands my attention, but it pacifies all my attention. It doesn't do after it becomes too familiar, which is why I think I'm so committed to exploring new movies and bands and books all the time. New to me, that is. Me seeing or hearing or reading something for the first time from the 60s, for instance, is as good as something released yesterday for these purposes. Maybe even better because things made these days is all over-processed, overwrought shit. But, and I recognize there are things made with quality that don't hijack my brain, but they're useless to me. Other people can recognize those things, But for the, Angel Sword commands attention to both sides of my thinking, but the other bands at the concert, I had parallel thoughts going on the whole time. I had actually considered not writing this next part as part of the script that I, talk to you into the camera, but instead putting it in captions at the appropriate points of the stuff I've already said to simulate that feeling of concurrent thought streams. But it's like, oh, that's a lot of work, and then even less of you would pay any attention to that than are bothering as it is. And then I couldn't put in the explanation tangents in there very well if I did that, and blah, blah. Okay, yeah. So, now we can start getting to the point. I'm watching What's-Her-Face waving the new wave of Finnish heavy metal flag, and I immediately start thinking about the OSR and how I call Lamentations of the Flame Princess an OSR game. The old school Renaissance OSR name was taken from some anonymous comment left on a message board to describe a flurry of grassroots activity around reviving old D&D rules for widespread use. Am I misremembering? I mean, it was anonymous. Did anyone ever figure out who wrote that? But the point is, the label came from a fan or an observer, or maybe not. I remember the person being anonymous on the message board, but maybe it was somebody we'd all recognize. Maybe they were intentionally creating a marketing tag and they were just a very clever viral marketer, but I don't think so. But I know it wasn't me. I'm not that clever, but I'm under the impression it was an organic adoption. It wasn't a flag created so we could fly it. That was supposed to be Targa, and didn't that work out well? I was around in those days to witness the birth of the OSR before I started doing my own things. And it was exciting. To hell with modern D&D. We can revive the real stuff. I mean, did you see that rant I wrote at the beginning of the Creature Generator? Which, by the way, thinking about that, it makes that little back cover graphic on Erica Zahn right in line with the very roots of LOTFP. And while I'm mentioning that, I was bored on the bus the other day and got weak, and pulled up Instagram just to make the time go by in the bus. And I was greeted with a clip of Matt Mercer discussing with someone whether or not the Kool-Aid Man was chaotic evil. So I got no regrets in that graphic, none at all. And when you give up social media, when you don't look at it for weeks or months at a time and you go back and look at it, it all looks like vapid, destructive nonsense. 100% of it, no exceptions. Useless, stupid. Jesus Christ, what has humanity done to itself? So, the OSR begins. And immediately, when people start making their stuff in accordance, I love that word today, with the old ways, now that the door's been opened for them, there was an immediate divide. People who had creative vision and their own voice, people who thought it was really important to recreate the tone and feel of the TSR period of their preference, and the people rushing in to say, look, I'm participating too, with nothing to really contribute. I was a critic of people aping the old TSR trade dress for their new creations, for instance, which makes my support of Carcosa maybe a little ironic, hypocritical, I don't know. But for all that Jeffrey's format mimicked original D&D, the contents most certainly did not. And I use OSR in relation to LOTFP to communicate the rules, framework, and process of play without having to explain it all every time out. Of course, given how the OSR label has been thoroughly hoarded out and bastardized over the years, it's probably not even useful for that purpose at this point, but since I think that the rules are not the most important part of a game, the label lets me communicate the boring stuff quickly so I can spend my effort telling a potential new fan or customer the interesting stuff that makes LOTFP different. Because how it's different is the important part, not how it's the same. And LOTFP is different than what the baseline OSR is, or was, or whatever. Even from day one, LOTFP was not meant to recreate the feel or tone of old TSR adventures. Deathfrost Doom, No Dignity in Death, these have different atmospheres than TSR adventures. Grinding Gear and Hammers of the God were more traditional, but still broke with convention in, I think, important ways. I was using, and still do use, the OSR rules framework, as well as other familiar things, as tools to do my own thing. The OSR as a concept was a good one, especially during the dominance of D&D 3rd edition, and when older editions were not legitimately available and the general gaming public had no idea that there was anything of value in the old ways and rules. The waving of any OSR flag was useful in getting attention from outsiders. It didn't define the work I was doing, or before I started what I was going to do. As I pointed out to some controversy back in the day, and oh yeah, rest in peace Tim Kask, I only found out about that a little while ago. When this was all quite new and fresh, I said that the chief benefit of the OSR, and why it was better than TSR, is that TSR would only release products in line with whatever the editorial voice of the company was at any particular point in time. But the OSR was a panoply of different voices and styles it was allowing and inspiring. The difference is, that was the important thing. And the willingness to not worship TSR as the be-all and end-all of everything, even while using their ways and means, was vital to have a continuing, vital, creative community. You say Shoulders of Giants, I say Stepping Stone. The label OSR should have been a sign that any thus defined product would be roughly compatible, and yes, roughly. First edition versus BX versus Holmes versus the original box, they're all very much the same, but different. Roughly compatible mechanically with each other in the old games, but I didn't think it should have any such assurances thematically or tonally. That's what I thought, So the OSR label is one I use as descriptive convenience, not a banner under which I march. Not that there's any point in marching under that banner anymore, considering the dragon we were all after is well and truly slain, and the older mechanics and ways of doing things have been absorbed as standard options and are now part of the regular toolkits in the greater hobby. We won! Hell, even Wizards of the Coast paid some heavy lip service to the OSR movement when putting together 5th edition D&D by hiring the universally respected community leaders Zach Smith and RPG Pundit as consultants. The adoption of the OSR label was, of course, not without controversy. People who were doing exactly what the OSR label was invented to describe. Rob Kuntz, for example, with his 2006 adventure Cairn of the Skeleton King and its follow-ups, thought of the OSR as an organization one joins, and rejected the label. I, of course, thought that was nonsense at the time. A 2006 adventure specifically designed to be used with 1st edition AD&D, especially from someone who was there back in the day, That's the exact sort of thing, definitionally, that inspired someone to even say there was an old school Renaissance happening. So saying that that's not part of it, what? Some people tried to imbue the OSR with outside values that had nothing to do with the rules. There are people who thought of the OSR as an expression of their general conservatism, and others trying to claim it as the domain of progressivism. I mean, remember that rainbow OSR logo? Again, people trying to define the OSR as some organization that you can join or prevent people from joining, rather than a neutral label describing certain attributes. Other people thought the OSR label should apply to any recreation or new material for any old game. Nonsense. Every bit as nonsense as if some new band wants to create a demi-lich clone band and call that part of the new wave of Finnish heavy metal. Translation for normal people? Demi-lich was a very weirdo death metal band, yes, from Finland, that released one album back in 1993. Death metal, of course, is part of the greater metal family, but it is implicitly understood that the heavy metal part of the new wave of Finnish heavy metal refers to more traditional styles, and absolutely not death metal. So you can see that analogy really was perfect. And I may note, there's no way to put this in organically in the narrative, so I'll just ram it in here. My problem with the gracious Vanquisher address from the stage, and that problem that I had with the Hugbox passage in Shadowdark in that video last year, they're the same criticism. People focused on what I said in that Shadowdark bit instead of what I was saying, but it's the exact same criticism. Now, the big difference between RPGs and other media is that you can't really participate in RPGs without doing the thing. If you're a fan of books, you can read and not write. You can watch a movie without producing a movie. You can listen to music without making any of your own. But if you play RPGs, you're doing RPG stuff. You know, the very nature of what a role-playing game is that to participate on any level means you have to be doing the thing. And RPGs wouldn't have a fan base enough to fill one of these little basement clubs in Helsinki if everybody doing the thing was required to be an actually creatively ambitious person. And I'll say it, I don't think there are 170 such people in the RPG or hobby, the RPG hobby or industry at all right now. Shit. Maybe not even in the entire history of RPGs. But that's a problem across all creative endeavors. RPGs, music and movies and whatever. They're just distractions for most people. Casual entertainments to distract themselves from their actual lives for a little bit. Why would they invest themselves into it heavily? That's why I made the joke about being surprised that the boring band wasn't headlining arenas. You need that sort of superficiality these days to reach enough of the general public to be able to play arenas. I mean, who else gets to play arenas besides that, Old people who gained their fame in a previous cultural zeitgeist, or in previous media paradigm. So you have to have that boring, broad appeal. So the truth, as I understand it anyway, so I guess I should say, instead of the truth, I should say my perception, is the majority of people into any particular interest are in it exactly because it's not challenging and not uncomfortable. That's the rest of their real lives, so fuck going through that for their entertainment. That's the center mass of any entertainment audience, and that's what most companies and creators are aiming for. People like me, and hopefully you, might complain and act like sticking your finger in the air to find out which way the wind is blowing, and catering to that, we'll say that's a bad thing. But doing that, that is a skill. And the people with that skill have a hell of a lot more comfortable lives than I do. Now, this script has been worked on for a month, finished quickly, in the beginning of the month, but little bits added here and there. Nothing really removed. For the past week, I've been just sitting on it, not knowing if I should actually say all this out loud. But then recent events and more people, blah, 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 made me think, just fuck it. Fuck everything. Fuck everyone. And the root of all problems in the entire world is this. Most people form their preferences socially, not personally, and because I am absolutely cursed to be miserable, that reality makes me absolutely disgusted with humanity as a whole. The feeling is largely mutual, and I really do behave like I am surrounded by honest-to-goodness invasion of the body snatchers pod people, and if I let my guard down and rest for even 1 minute, I will be lost forever. Do you realize how many times I've heard at conventions, oh, this looks really awesome, but my players wouldn't like it. All I want to do is scream at them. Well, dump those fucking losers and find players that are compatible with your taste in gaming. I mean, voluntarily giving other people veto power over your free time and imagination. I mean, I've tried that, and it feels like I'm being physically crushed the entire time. It's intolerable. I realize some people say that sort of thing, my players wouldn't like it. I realize that some of the people, maybe most of them, it's just a polite way of saying no thank you. But some of them at least are telling it like it is, and I don't understand why they're happy not making their own choices in these matters. But most people put more weight on who they're doing things with than the thing they're doing. That's the reality, and I'm a freak because I think that's exactly backwards. Seriously, it's not that I am. I've been made to think that I'm antisocial and misanthropic and have weird tastes, even when I'm not, all those things, even when I'm not going through mental episodes. And this script and those 4 hour, and that 4 hour, largely, partially unscripted video, it's all built on the current mental episode, or hopefully this recently past mental episode. But when I want to play, I don't have much of a problem finding players. It's not that fucking hard. I mean, even before I'm, Z-grade famous game designer, it's never a problem finding players. But then I'm attached to the game and not really the people showing up to play it. I know that none of what I'm saying here is to my advantage as far as making friends and influencing people. I mean, I've had this brain and I've been around people for 51 years now. I'm not a complete moron. Again, a little bit self-aware. But 51 years has taught me that going along with the crowd to better get along with people means that my turn, what I want, it never comes. Not really. Not ever. Mostly outvoted when I raise my hand and say, hey, what about this? Or if people are kind enough to humor me, everyone ends up hating my thing. And then I don't have any people to do anything with anymore again. I just indulge my own things, and then when the possibility of doing things with people comes up again, the normal thing they're doing is completely alien to me, and everyone, including me, just feels uncomfortable that I'm even there. I have to be an asshole. I have to insist on my space. I have to be the one initiating doing anything that I want. And I have to insist on my space for my things to the consternation of pretty much everyone around me, or else it's like I don't even exist. I might as well jump in front of a train for all that I get out of life. I've given up on ever trying to fit in or be generally accepted. And it really does suck, It doesn't feel good at all. But mostly I'm just tired of having to fight just to exist. So, that's what I have two thought streams always, destroying my brain about. So, okay, section break. Now, get out your popcorn and watch me stretch the Metal Life RPG analogy to the absolute breaking point. The reason I think that aiming for center mass creatively is not a good thing, the reason the idea of people forming their preferences socially rather than personally disgusts me is it's railroading. It's railroading. It's creative and social railroading. Your creative and social actions and thoughts are geared towards outcomes not of your choosing. You're beholden to forces not your own, either consciously as you conform to avoid bad outcomes, or you are victim to use some inside baseball RPG terms, quantum ogre illusionism, where you think you're acting with agency, but you're still being directed by forces unknown and your outcomes are anyway predetermined. So you're given a checklist of things you're supposed to do, all the steps you have to take on a railroaded adventure to achieve a successful conclusion. This gets complicated because in real life, for instance, reality is the ultimate arbiter. Then people get together and they create rules for each other, trying to organize things for best outcomes. But that's a fraught process. Best outcomes for who exactly? And even if we agree on the outcomes we want, how do we organize, how do we figure out what are the best ways to organize any particular thing? Or even if we should organize it at all, rather than leaving it up to every individual to work it out for themselves. And what happens to the people who disagree with what everyone has decided? And even if you figure any of that out, somebody comes along and organizes an addition change so this life you've built and the attitudes you held in order to achieve the life you want are now outdated and fuck you, chant the new slogans or you will suffer. I mean, speaking of such slogans, 20 minutes of fun in 4 hours still chaps my ass. Quarter of a century later, still chaps my ass. And the sort of people who say that deserve 0 minutes of fun, and that's what I've spent my career trying to give them. You get to live your truth, be your authentic self, only as long as the path leads you to the predetermined acceptable outcome that other people approve of. Case in point. In RPGs, at the height of the 3rd edition boom, every motherfucker out there was compromising their own vision to put out D20 versions of their own original games. I'm sorry, but that's just self-subjugation and abject begging for public approval. Keep in mind, I did that too. I did a crowdfunding campaign where, in a bid to get more support, I offered Pathfinder stats as part of the PDF versions of the projects. I was convinced to do that by this marketing person I was working with, and I think that effort largely failed because I did not give a shit about that part of it. I didn't act like I gave a shit about that part of it. It was, sure, throw it at a wall. You throw it at the wall, see what happens. It's sort of like using AI to make an advertisement on the back of a giveaway catalog a few years back. Total mistake, shouldn't have done it, and I want to clarify, I paid someone else to make that image. I didn't even do the image. I just said, make something that looks like this. But, the Pathfinder stats, that AI ad, I absolutely beat myself up senseless over these decisions. And not the things that people scream at me that I'm doing wrong. But the OSR bubbled up from the people, or some of the people, as a reaction against 3rd edition at the exact time the entire industry proper was conforming to it. The reaction against the OSR was fierce. People were even calling the movement's publications illegal. Even on a real-life local level, in January 2006, in Finland, I put up flyers around town looking for players for the AD&D 1st edition game I was wanting to run, and somebody actually wrote me telling me I was foolish for wanting to play such an old and outdated game and I'll never find players. How dare I try to find players for the game I wanted to run, right? One fucking email in my head 20 years later. Fucker. And I had anywhere from, 5 to 11 people show up every week based on those flyers. Fuck you. Anyway. Now, going against the grain, being a rebel, as it were, even for something as inconsequential as what RPG system you prefer, it doesn't mean you're a better person. It doesn't mean you're a smarter person. It doesn't even mean you're more of an individual. The OSR was still a social movement within gaming, and it's still based on work that someone else initially did. But I think it does mean you're a person with agency and maybe even integrity. You're deciding what's right for you, and then you follow that wherever it leads. And if that leads through the more difficult territory, well then the more difficult territory it's going to be. What the fuck else are you going to do? Not do it? Sort of like the long hair, band shirt metalhead look. It doesn't make me an individual to have adopted this style that's been around longer than I've been alive. But in the early to mid-90s in the US, it was not one of the options for respectable people. It's not showing my individuality, but it is showing my agency. That I've never wavered from it? I'll call that integrity. That I haven't gone bald yet? Well, that's just luck, but I've seen what's fallen out in the shower, and it's certainly not too late for me to end up with a skullet, so stay tuned. I've got a quote here. Quote, "There are many lessons that struggling can teach young men, allowing for improvement and rising above. Of course, that's not to say suffering is necessarily good, but I think black metal, in the real sense of the second wave movement, was a self-created rite of passage, like a walkabout, which was instrumental in a lot of people's transition into adulthood. It has affected the way I see the world so much that it can often be hard to keep true friends who have not also been through the same thing, or a similar process from other forms of art or life experience. You know if you're one of them because you often refer people who don't have that mindset as normal. It's a cult, but I believe without the negative connotations of the word, perhaps one that will stay with you for life." Unquote. That's Matt McNerney from Hex Vessel, Grave Pleasures, etc. And that quote was from Bardo Methodology number 7 from 2021. And this is number 7. Yes. And I want to mention with like the quotes I'm throwing around, especially with the black metal stuff, it's like, I'm not really a black metal guy. I'm really not so much, especially into the early second wave black metal. I can appreciate some of it. Emperor was always awesome, but it's not my thing. I was already going nuts for things like Cynic's Focus and Amorphous' Tales from the Thousand Lakes when the second wave black metal stuff, when I became aware of it and it was available to me. So basically my thing is the opposite of what that black metal stuff was at that time in sound and attitude. But I get what they're coming from. I totally sympathize with what they were trying to fight against, this ennui of a comfortable modern life and being dissatisfied by the packaged entertainments and fake plastic rebellions that get presented as the real thing. I empathize with, if not sympathize with, why they became church burners and grave desecrators and murderers. Taking up a real-life fight against the priests of the Temple of Syrinx. That's why I'm comfortable using the black metal imagery sometimes for my work, even if my favored forms of that are later weird variants from bands like Arcturus and In the Woods and Sullifold and Fluidity and What Enslaved Became. This channel featured a bit of the Unabomber manifesto years ago. I get the rage against how things are. But my way of hating what they hated went a different way, mostly withdrawing instead of lashing out. And that was during the same decade that I didn't watch any TV, not broadcast or cable. I wasn't listening to the radio. I was like completely cut off from most of mass culture. And I didn't have a peer group. I didn't have a single person to talk to that had any knowledge or experience without any of this metal stuff. Not for years and years. All of the people I hung out with during that time, they were pro wrestling fans, because I was into that, but they weren't metalheads. So I found my own way through it all without any social reinforcement or camaraderie or influence or sense of belonging. And my thought is that the ends do not justify the means, so maybe it's good that I wasn't involved with similarly minded folks egging each other on to do something. So I just do make-believe. I just have my corner of the world instead of trying to blow the world up. And, all of the people who commissioned or created D20 versions of their own games, I think acted without integrity. When I offered D20 stats for those 4 adventures, I acted without integrity. When I decided to use AI graphics for that one ad, I acted without integrity. Anyone deciding which system to publish their RPGs for, based on popularity and not their own personal preferences, is acting without integrity. Just like the bands which forego their own ideas to better fit into established expectations from fans, or alter their sounds to better fit into existing marketing categories, which is all genres and subgenres are when in the hands of business entities, they're all acting without integrity. Just like the bands using backing tracks to fill out their sound live, they're acting without integrity. Bands which use software to correct recorded performances are acting without integrity. Like edit, I want to say when I make is not like recordings and like making a movie. To me, the editing and doing additional takes is not itself an example of this, as long as you're doing it. Like, if it's like that wasn't good, do it again, you're still recording an actual performance, even if it's the 5th time you performed that. That's what a recording is. When you make a movie, do it again. You do 10 takes, or if you're Stanley Kubrick, you do 200 takes. But you're putting together, what ends up there is an actual performance. It's just not necessarily the first one. And to me, that's different than if you say, okay, this is live. But that's just me, And then, of course, shitty bands these days just add a saxophone and act like they're all unique and arty now. And it's like, no, motherfucker, you're just being an even more annoying metalcore band now. I was listening to Painkiller, the John Zorn band, almost 35 years ago, motherfucker, so fuck off with that shit. Five the Hierophant is an excellent current band that uses the saxophone as a primary instrument, by the way. Seeing them live last year was a great experience in London, maybe in the tiniest room I've ever seen a concert in. I also saw Rivers of Nile last year. I was there to see Cynic, who was one of the openers, at a packed Tavastia in Helsinki, and I really wanted to kill myself. I mean, Jesus. It's the difference between something that sounds like it's tapping into something timeless and something that sounds very now. Fuck now. The world is hard, and making our way through it is going to be filled with compromises. Demanding that people maintain the highest of integrity at all times, it's unrealistic. It would require a person to be inhuman. And the truth is, everybody's in shambles to some degree or another. I've been all blah, but I know there are people so much worse than me. And I know there are people that are much better than me. But they're not going to be perfect either, Maybe instead of judging the integrity of the person at all times, we can judge individual pieces of work on their integrity. We can do that because it is possible for a work to be done with integrity, and compromises should be a mark against that. I don't know. Best practices are often not actually the best practices. And in creative endeavors, the best practice for most people may not be the best practice for you. Experiment. Shit, reinvent wheels which seem to be working perfectly well. Find out. I mean, if you judge your own work, if you create your own work according to how popular it is with other people, you're an empty goddamn shell as far as I'm concerned. You're lacking in integrity, and the work you're producing under that mindset will be lacking integrity. Doing good business and keeping integrity don't always conflict, but when they do, fuck business. And that's why I'm in the situation I'm in, kids. One of the reasons. I'm a mess. Here's a quote. I don't have the magazine, but quote, "Adapting is what constitutes selling out. Adapting to the preferences of the masses, ridding yourself of unwanted contents, washing your hands until they're clean and shiny, ready for mass consumption, or washing your hands until they're clean and shiny, ready for mass production," unquote. And that's Eric Danielson of Watain from a 2007 Terrorizer interview. If I told you the story about how I had the chance to write for Metal Maniacs, a newsstand metal mag in the US, 2005 or 2006, I was offered the chance to write a record review. I offered to do it for free as long as I retained the rights to my work. Metal Maniacs would get a 1-year exclusivity on it, and then the rights would revert back to me. And that was denied, so that was that. I didn't do it. A lot of people who wrote for that magazine ended up doing more in the industry. As Craig Zoller ended up making movies and writing novels. But I wasn't going to throw my work into a black hole where it existed for a minute when it's on the newsstand and then disappears forever. What you can do is what you can do, and using cheats and tricks to achieve polish that you cannot honestly achieve on your own is acting without integrity. There's a difference between a tool you use to do the thing and a tool that does the thing for you. If a tool did it for you, don't say you did it, because you didn't. Make imagination weird and individual, exclusively. Is weird and individual the same thing? Anyway. Yes. Now, after everything I've just said, the difficult thing about this all, where I undo everything that I've been saying for the past however long, I think it's important. I think it's actually vital for there to be a normal, a baseline. Everything and everyone being actually individually weird is just this situation where nobody cooperates and nothing can ever be anything. It's just a mass of random sludge, primordial chaos. There being an established normal is necessary for grounding, whether in a society or a creative scene. It gives a common point of reference, something for people to anchor to and react against. There needs to be a leading brand, the biggest band, the blockbuster movie. There needs to be a Scott Burns or a Matthew Mercer for belligerent assholes to be against. But the important thing is, Scott Burns believed in what he was doing, and that's how he built his production career. I got no doubt Matt Mercer is doing the things he's wanting to do. Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson and the rest, at the very beginning at least, were just doing their thing. And look what that all turned into. It's just that as time goes on, more of the things that are the market leaders, RPGs and music and whatever medium, everything, everywhere, is just more calculating and cynical and numbers-oriented. And, and it's not the result of anyone just following their muse and hitting the jackpot, finding out their muse just happens to resonate with the masses. And that calculation just makes the whole world miserable to live in. But that is the world. Homegrown property grows into any sort of popularity, gets bought out by a soulless corporation who then hires worthless yes-men drunk on the influence they now have. They crash the property into the ground creatively while raking in the cash because they have the infrastructure to support the property. That's the whole fucking world now. And as much as I really, really hate D&D 3rd Edition, Wizards of the Coast bought the bankrupt TSR. I mean, I'm tempted to say for love of the game, but at the very least, Wizards of the Coast was a gaming company, at least before Hasbro came in. And I've been... I sat on this whole script for a couple weeks trying to figure out how to sell this last point. Yeah, we're getting to the home stretch. When my depressed state non-productivity led me to start binging Mystery Science Theater 3000 on YouTube. So many depressing realizations from that. I mean, I used to watch that show every week on Saturday mornings. It was a cherished time in my late high school era. The rest of the family would leave to do I forget what, but I would have a couple few hours alone in the house at the same time every week. It was the only scheduled, reliable time I knew I could relax and not have my guard up and have to pretend to get along with other people. And I'd spend most of that time watching MST3K. And occasionally trying to crack one off to Shusha on the Spanish channel, but goddamn that's difficult when there's all those kids on the fucking show and nothing kills a boner like a child. But with modern eyes, hot take incoming, MST3K is kind of an awful show with an awful premise, actually. The good parts are the host segments, and the bits where they watch the movies is... The idea of just having a thing where you're mocking for 90 minutes at a time, 12 to 24 times a season for over a dozen seasons. Or maybe It's just not good if you try to, if you're watching that and binging it for 8 hours at a time for days on end. Maybe that was the problem. Once a week, good. 48 hours in a row, not, I don't know. Lately, when I'm watching MST3K, I'm trying to watch the movies. And it's annoying these people won't shut up. So, yeah, depressing realization that I got from watching MST3K. The main thing I like about Red Letter Media is it portrays the kind of friend group I'd like to have. A mix of like-minded people with a shared interest being able to talk knowledgeably about that interest while being interesting and amusing. And that's depressing because RLM content is very heavily produced. This isn't just some buddies getting together and watching talk movies and it happens to be recorded. It's a produced show. I mean, the show's entertaining. It's pretty educated on filmmaking, and goddamn, they were 100% right about the Star Wars prequels, and fuck you if you're trying to rehabilitate them and convince people otherwise. And of course, I make the association between RLM and MST3K because both make fun of movies, but RLM contextualizes their jokes in the discussion of movies and movie making, and not just shitting on them. The presented footage of the RLM guys watching movies is selective. They're not doing full-length riffing or reaction videos in that way. And the guys are regularly positively entertained by what they're watching, and they'll talk about things that they enjoy on a regular basis. It's not simply detached dumping on shit from a great height. But yeah, it's a produced show, and realizing that is depressing because to me what is portrayed there would be to me the pinnacle of social interaction. But it's fake. And I realize I don't even have a realistic model of enjoyable human interaction. It's just either me talking at a bored person who doesn't want to be there, or a person talking at bored me who doesn't want to be there. Those are my realistic social options. That's why RPGs are so good for me. It's a very structured framework for social interaction. At Dragon Meet, the last convention, there was someone that actually came up to the table. It's like, I know you don't like to talk to people. It's like, no, it's fine. That's what we're there for. You don't have to apologize for approaching the table to have a discussion. Just don't ask me what system is this. That's the problem. Otherwise, that's what they're there for. There's a, yeah. Oh, God, my brain hurts. Next depressing realization. It feels like how I experience the world is that nothing real can exist in the current day. Everything just slides towards being more and more plastic. Just a couple weeks ago, for the first time, saw some of the revival MST3K episodes with Jonah Ray, Felicia Day, and Patton Oswalt. And immediately, there was something really off with those. I had an instant revulsion towards them. I watched a few of them to figure out if it's just, I don't like different. But it's plastic with like CGI effects during the host segments, and it's like, yeah. And it's like, is this just what low budget looks like today versus 1991? Although how low budget was that show really? I mean, the intro has a lot of people, yeah, anyway. No, that's not the problem. The problem is how it's produced. In early MST3K, the same people were in front of and behind the cameras. They had other people that were working behind the scenes, and then someone on screen leaves. It's like they shuffle someone up. So it's still backstage and front of camera, same people. Writer, actor, set designer, same people. The new MST3K, they're hiring people to do the things, and you can feel the difference. But since writing that, but before recording this, I see there's another return happening for MST3K with the Mike era cast and promising a production like it used to be with handcrafted sets. So interesting timing on that. RLM has gotten more slickly produced over time, but it's still them doing it. They're just refining their techniques and, using more resources over time. I remember in the mid-2010s when LOTFP was a hot indie RPG, and it just kept growing and growing, and my God, I thought I'd be able to buy a house off of all of this. And I don't think now that that was ever realistic. Between actual self-sabotage and my mind being so out of step with other people that it might as well be self-sabotage, there was always going to be a hard limit on what LOTFP can be. I do think it's higher than what it currently is, but surely I don't think it could be much more than what it was at the height of its popularity. Why would it need to be? I was doing great at that time. Because in the end, LOTFP is me doing the thing, working with other people doing the thing. When I decided to hire people on a salaried basis, that's how good things were going. When I was able to do that, I was hiring writers and artists. When I took out that business loan in 2019, it was to keep slower selling back catalog in print. No real capital expenditures, no vision towards business infrastructure or bringing in an actual business person, because that stuff doesn't compute to me. It has nothing directly to do with doing the thing. And I'd like to think, yeah. And like this channel, I never intended this channel to just be me reading scripts to the camera. I had ideas for productions with other people, good-looking people with charisma, in the starring roles. I would script it and other people would do it. I realize now that might have not been as good as I thought it was going to be. I mean, the examples that did get done weren't so great technically. I've no filmmaker training, obviously. And getting that training in a serious way just to do YouTube more gooder seems like a misallocation of resources and effort, so I just do the thing as I can and not really worry about how it's supposed to be. Oh, notice second video, I learned a trick. It only took, 6 years. Have a normal light in my face and do a colored light in the background, and things look halfway decent. Why did that take so long? Anyway. But the world is going headlong even more into fake and plastic, and definitely not the way it's supposed to be. People using AI for internet posting, making and adjusting photos and video, and people sending me AI-generated things inspired by LOTFP fairly often. People censoring what they say, using euphemisms on the internet. I have discussions sometimes with production people about what counts as the right kind of AI. For example, after the 4-hour video, I had, the TV I was using as a monitor, not using it today. There was a hum coming off of it, and that's audible. And someone said, "Oh yeah, I got a thing where I could have next time just send me the video. I gotta, just run this video through this thing. It'll take out the hum." I think that's fine, even if it is advertised as AI. But then generating text or generating images, I don't like that. But where exactly is that line of, because there are going to be edge cases. So what is that line? Well, we got to discuss it, I've told writers and artists, do not use AI. But I guess it's going to be so ubiquitous that someone's going to pass AI by me at some point without telling me that's what it is. And I'm not going to know right away. And when I find out, it's like, oh, what comes into my brain is, I'm going to end my life because I'm going to get on a plane because I have the addresses of everyone that I pay, and I'm going to take them out for doing that to me. I mean, what's the internet term? Unaliving them. And that'll be it for my life too, because I'm not going to live on the run, So, see? I get the people who hate something enough to be murderous about it, right? But, I just hope when the time comes, and it's pretty obvious it will come, I hope that my cowardice is stronger than my convictions in this matter. And there have been many such cases. But, I just reread Industrial Society and Its Future, and for all the contradictions inherent in the life I live and want to live versus what it says, it does identify a lot of today's problems awfully well, and that was written 30 years ago, mind you, or published 30 years ago. I'm not sure when it was written. And I think he makes one hell of an argument overall. This is a wonderful paragraph that will not be used against me at all. Anyway, just don't do that. Don't do that. Don't try to slip AI by me. And we're fine. Don't do it. Don't, never gamble on my stability. But, I can't stand. And at times I honestly get very angry. Just at people even discussing AI. Like if I come across something online, people are talking about AI, I get mad. And, if somebody just brings up AI in a conversation, oh, I use AI. I have. This is something that has happened, that I just blank them. And I act like they don't exist and just turn and go somewhere else. I have been what I consider shockingly rude about it to people's faces, or leaving their face. And it's more of an automatic reaction than any sort of thought that this is what I'm doing now. Because as far as I'm concerned, this whole generative AI thing should not exist. No. And so, boy, am I going to be a happier person as time goes on. Another quote. I tell you verily that if Satan and demons are real and the current state of things indicate they are, for sure, then artificial intelligence is the dark force's most malicious and cunning onslaught on humanity to date, as it, in the long run and best of scenarios, will lead to the complete auto-tuning of our minds, making us all clones. What we need is more blasphemers in the world, people who exercise the spirit of this age through real music, genuine art, soul-mining literature, and acts such as honest hard work committed to true beauty. All of them are blasphemers against our despicable zeitgeist, unquote. That's Ola Blomqvist from the band Doutha, co-founder of I Hate Records, in an interview published February 2019 in Bardo Methodology number 5. I wonder how he is on AI these days. I haven't looked. So I have great lapses in judgment. I have various great incompetencies, some of which I don't even want to address. A lot of technology things, really. I often bite off more than I can chew. I'm just an idiot generally when it comes to life matters. I'm a mess. But I'm real. There are things I should improve, things I won't improve. Hopefully some of them I'll improve more, but But I think I'm a real person, and I don't know if this is just cope or excuse, but I think it is better to be a genuine fuck up than artificially good, says the person that's taking Ozempic again to start fixing that shit. I mean, genuinely good would be best, but let's be real here. Genuinely. So, yeah. I think we'll finish up now. I'm probably gonna be very freaked out about how long this has gone on for. So let's finish up, and I'll leave you with this one little nugget. Remember how one definition of Istin's scene metal is music which is played by people who are really quite fascinated by the idea of making some music of their own, but have yet to find an emotion or an idea to express? Well, have you ever noticed how many licensed IP RPGs there are?